Hi guys, I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Today we are doing our live after party for our Silence and Starsong book club. I posted this morning our very last book discussion, and we are just going to do kind of a fun wrap up together. Together with me is Michael Kane, author of After Moses, and Patrick from Cave to the Cross. Hannah also participated in a couple of the discussions, but she could not make it tonight. So we'll miss her. All right. So we got some fun things planned. Not games, because I don't do games so much. But we got some fun questions from a few people and some kind of overarching discussion of the collection that we would like to talk about. Should I start right off with a question?
Go for it. Kick us off.
Okay.
Icebreaker. You're
Uh,
driving alone in the woods and you see Mothman and Bigfoot. Which one do you hit first? Answer
Easily
Tom
Mothman.
Bombadil.
Mothman. It's a bug.
Easily Mothman.
Mothman is gonna wreck
always
havoc.
implicated as evil as opposed to Bigfoot, who
Very
could just be
true.
a dumb animal or a redneck in a suit.
And either way, we're doing the world a favor.
Patrick is going to ask, can I drift and get them both?
With my
Can
Bigfoot
I
monster
spin
truck.
it just right to get Bigfoot with the front quarter panel and Mothman with the back?
I was joking with Katie that this will be the last time until we do our next book, Lord willing, that she can content farm me. So I just been noticing that all the short clips seem to be poking fun.
The trolley problem with Bigfoot, Doug Wise says.
I'm sorry. I'm not funny enough on my own, so I'm pleased as punch to have somebody else to make shorts of.
Well, that's the nice thing about social media, that we can all come together, we can read books, and we can realize that we're not as fun as what we are, but we are funny among friends. So there's that. We can find our own stand-up routine without embarrassing us too much.
I sometimes laugh at my own jokes. Just saying.
So one of the questions that we got was like a Rorschach test. What do we think the cover is of?
It's a gas giant.
That's what I thought. Seems pretty straightforward.
Odd coloration. But, seems like stylized gas giant is the immediate thing.
Yeah.
Or is it light breaking through the darkness of Trad Pub?
Yeah.
Maybe a little overthought.
Listen, there's one thing I've never been accused of, and that's thinking too much.
I've enjoyed using these colors in my thumbnails.
You have done that, haven't you?
It's very striking looking, I feel like. A little more, it's a little poppy,
Yeah. Just strong primary colors.
Yep.
Nice shades.
Yeah.
Color scheme is everything. Palettes are everything.
Yep.
I don't know. I think I'm right on this. The silence is the black, and the Starsong is coming into fruition. So that's. And there's no written by John Grisham bold across the front page. It's just, listen, you want to open this.
Which story is your number one recommendation to potential readers, and why?
Ooh.
I mean, it's got to be Archangel, right? Like, it's not that there aren't other great stories, but I mean, the demon-powered nuclear Zara submarine was just so intriguing in concept and so bewildering in execution that, I mean, it's basically worth the price of admission on its own. And there's other great ones too, but that's definitely the stick with you one for me.
Sure.
So the question is, which one would I recommend to somebody? And I'm going to think that, yes, I mean, if we're going to talk about favorites, that's going to be there. But the one that I'm going to recommend is The Two Godly Fishmongers, A Tale of Strange Providences, because that one is very, I think, a good swath of all the stories kind of mixed into one. So you kind of have the fantasy-ish element with, like, is it sci-fi or fantasy? We can always get into that quagmire. I won't, for purposes of not getting kicked off the channel while being on it.
That's funny. Go ahead. I'll say something about Godly Fishmonger about that. Keep going.
So and then this week. And then the combination of both the Christian aspect of the story, which I think we'll kind of get into a little bit later, and then just, it's a good sci-fi story. It's an alien doing alien things, and then revelations, and just it in the short amount of time that it takes, as in being a short story, it does everything you could possibly want, and it's a well-rounded story that I'm going to give to somebody, and I go, if you like that one, read Archangel after that.
Right. I was going to say, it's interesting in that, if you go through all of them, the Two Godly Fishmongers is the only one that's basically actually straight sci-fi. You know, in that you can argue you see a presence of the divine when the alien begins quoting the book of Daniel. But it's not like the supernatural or God as a character in the story, or demons are part of the story, right? There's just that light touch, and past that, it's just 16th century Presbyterians and alien from outer space, right? And the intersection of those two is just, that's the only one that's like pure sci-fi.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which is interesting.
Archangel's probably up there.
It's good.
But like, if I'm recommending, I'm probably going to go with Have Ye Offered Unto Me. Because it's a little more accessible.
Well, free lunch was my second.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was one of the things that I liked about what Katie has prepared for us, is that a lot of the ones that I didn't think I liked as much, talking about it, was while I still held my, I'd like a little bit more, there was a lot more that I got out of it discussing it with you two. So I ended up liking it a bit more than when I had first initially read it. So one of the nice things about book clubs.
Yeah.
I'd say Have You Offered Unto Me is a good second for, especially for like the recommendation, because it's shorter. I think it's one of the shorter ones in the story, in the collection. So. It's got very familiar settings and themes, and it punches hard. It punches well above its weight, and it gets you into it.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong with something that starts with kind of a small conflict and then escalates to shooting a demon in the face, and then resolves with getting the girl.
A demon-possessed Fet's professor in the face. Right? Important distinction.
In modern day, this would be the same thing. Yeah. I think the story, the book started out well with the story that it started out with A Matter of Honor. I think that too is, I wouldn't say safe, but it provides like an overarching viewpoint of what you'll get through the rest of it. So, with the Godly Fishmongers, you have, Presbyterianism, but you don't always have the in your face God aspect. Like The Gamer, I think, is one. Although
Right.
you could almost argue that there's a sense of, matrixy divinity in there. But as far as you have your action, you have your haunted house, and we're going to slay some demons that are able to be slain. But ultimately, it's like, well, yeah, you can read it for that, but also you can read it again and then realize, the political alliance, the theological alliances, the switch over, and then just friendship all around. It's one of those things where I enjoy certain stories, not because I'm deficient in them in my life, but because I like to see them well. Father son stories are always gonna, if they're done well, I'm always gonna be sobbing like a small child, because I just love that aspect. And then friends without anyone having to resort to anybody's sexuality or anything like that. Just like Appaloosa or Tombstone. You have just a good story, and then there's friendship built in there, and so that was one that I thought kicked it off well and provided kind of a good stepping stone for the rest of the stories that we see.
Yeah, and like I said, that's not one of my favorites, but what it does functioning as the beginning is it starts with the mundane, and then it tells you that something in the woods is very strange. Right. That the stories that you hear are probably true.
Here there
Right.
be
And so
monsters.
going forward, everything is strange and like that, right? So I think it works as a kickoff.
I like how it sort of sets the stage for the treatment of the supernatural as well, of faith in particular, as being something that even with the characters being divided about who has the true faith, right? Everybody's got faith, right? On some level, they believe in God and Jesus and the supernatural, and that is going to be an assumed part of these stories, that faith and the supernatural have an impact on the characters' lives, as opposed to a lot of trad pub and sci-fi in particular that sort of assumes sort of a post-religion society, or kind of like a sterile secularism.
Yeah. Even though I like the movie for the most part, like John Constantine to me is a good example of squandered potential, and it's fitting with the character, but that is one where it's like, okay, there's redemption in there, but also John Constantine is not just going to go to heaven because he sacrificed himself to save a chick. Like that's just not going to happen. But in the purposes of that story, it works. But it's also lost because, okay, that's all you have to do to get to heaven is just one little thing of self-sacrifice, and that's it. That seems a pretty low bar for that. But overall, though, that movie is a lot of fun. And this one doesn't have that because it operates in a world where the especially our last story, right? There's this world that we live in, but then there's this world we also live in, and so the characters have to either come to face to face with it, or already accept it, and then like our guy, yeah, the Wanderer of that makes sense for why he still believes in that type of world, and goes and slays witches, but also needs to do other things, not do other things with those witches.
As we have discussed.
Just a real quick hi to the chat. Doug Wise, thank you for coming, and thank you for sending questions. I appreciate you. William Jeffrey Rankin, Cave to the Cross, and Michael Kane are both in the chat. And Joseph Knowles and Brian McCoppin. Joseph says, yes, glad that putting A Matter of Honor in the leadoff spot made sense to everyone. You hit on a lot of the reasons I put it first.
And I did not talk to him beforehand, so he wasn't feeding me lines. Came up with it all on my own. I was only talking to Katie beforehand. She gave me the notes. Thank you.
Let's see. So we talked about how the Two Godly Fishmongers is like the only sci-fi, the only true sci-fi story. What would you say the other stories are genre-wise?
I mean, if you're splitting them into the if you have to split sci-fi and fantasy into two boxes, Godly Fishmonger is the only one that fits truly into sci-fi, right? The rest of them will fit into the broadest category of fantasy, right?
Disagree. Archangel. Archangel.
I think the supernatural is too present in Archangel.
Yes, but I don't view supernatural as fantasy.
No, I don't either. I don't either, but that's one of those cases where the line gets so fuzzy that I don't know why I say that Archangel feels like it crosses over onto the fantasy side. Maybe because it relies so much on kind of him hearing the voices and kind of having those flashback visions, the vision with the child and things like that. Maybe there's enough of those things together that made it feel more fantastical that I would put it in that box.
Yeah. The reliance on like iconography. Is that the way you say that?
Right. Yeah.
The symbolism is a little more magical feeling than sci-fi.
And that may be because we're all silly Protestants that aren't really into iconography. So
listen, I will continue to protest. Thank you.
Some of our Roman and Eastern friends might be rolling over right now, going, "Wait a second, that's not magical."
Doug Wise says Archangel is almost horror more than either sci-fi or fantasy. Yeah, I was gonna say occult horror, but that tends to fall under fantasy,
right? Like broadly speaking, it's like things can be part of multiple boxes, and that's always why all genres are always fluid. You know, most horror you can argue is fantasy.
Genres, not genders, right? Genres, not genders.
Right.
Well, like David's book, because it's got demons and occult stuff, is also like occult horror, but that's clearly sci-fi because you're in space. So if you're in a submarine, that's more techie. So is it like there's
submarines are just spaceships of the sea?
Submarines are 10 times scarier than spaceships. Have you ever watched like Abyss or any of those bottom of the ocean movies? They're way scarier than vacuum. Pressure is scarier than vacuum.
I agree.
Because if the airlock blows out, you got 30 or so seconds of consciousness if you go out the airlock, right? With those rich guys in that submarine the other year, they were instently gone, right? That is so much scarier.
And here's
get atomized by a bulkhead failure.
And that's why it's not as scary, because you don't realize it. This is my issue with fast zombies. Fast zombies are going to run at you. They're scary for a second and they're going to eat you. Slow zombies are methodical. Yeah, you can get away from slow zombies, but a million slow zombies all behind you and you're running out of water, speed, they're not running out of anything except for distance to get to you. That's why slow zombies are always more scary than fast zombies.
I can see that. Instant death versus 30 seconds of consciously dying.
Yeah.
That's definitely a different kind of horror for sure.
Yeah, but if you let your imagination take you, you're like, oh, between me and evaporation of my blood vessels is this, 4-inch door that's circle, and if I touch this button, I'll doom us all. All right, well, we'll scare there.
I feel like Submarine is a little scarier too, because of the wider range of things that could be outside as opposed to like in a spaceship. the kind of things that you're going to run across are generally other spacey things and not living creatures.
Well, okay, so look, think about it this way. Think about how much tension there is in every submarine movie. Think about how anxiety inducing they are, because there's an implied claustrophobia when there's the crushing pressure and it's a small place. It's always dark, it's always smelly and full of men. The lights are weird colors, you know.
You have
There
to be
is
quiet. Mm-hmm.
Right, there's always this natural claustrophobia, and so I think that lends itself to horror more
Yeah.
so than space, where things the nearest thing is probably is 10,000 miles from you at best, you know. Right?
Yeah.
I just think there's the different feeling, which isn't to say that you can't also build science fiction that way. You know, there are
Alien.
You know, you look at the movie Alien, or you look at Event Horizon, you know.
Oh, there's one right there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
There it
You're
goes.
good.
Yeah. I'm back.
Yeah, Event Horizon.
You look at there are some sci-fi movies that use that setting in the same way, but it's almost a necessity with Submarine.
Yeah.
So yes, Archangel, you're right. Definitely got some horror.
Joseph Knowles says, yes, I was actually a little worried people would look at this first issue and think we were only a horror magazine.
Okay, so what's got horror? A Matter of Honor has horror. Archangel has horror. Have You Offered Under Me's got a little bit, but I don't think that's primarily horror there.
The Shadow of Stain. Well,
Shadow of the Stain has horror.
Sure.
And Little Hidden Empire too, but not but a lot of these, they're not like the primary. It's not like the primary genre going into it, right?
Yeah. I would say like most of those have that sort of a cult flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not full-blown horror, but there's the demonic as an element.
And I think I'm always bad at this because I really want to pare down my genres to like 5 different things. So I've got like theology, which includes other people's theology and philosophy. And then I have sci-fi because I'm a big fan of sci-fi. So sci-fi is going to be there. And because I'm a product of Barnes Noble Youth, I'm going to include my fantasy in there. But then everything else is just fiction and nonfiction. So where I put my horror is just in my sci-fi and fantasy, because then I don't have to figure out if it's, you know, a sci-fi thing or a fantasy thing. But if you're a person that was into horror, maybe you do what I do and you exercise the horror out of your fiction collection. But then, like, when it comes to poetry, like I messaged Katie one time, I'm like, organize my bookshelf. I'm like, where do I put poetry? Because like people are just making up words about things, but is it fiction or nonfiction? And her and the most important woman in my life, my wife, said nonfiction. So I got 2 out of the 3 people who matter in organizing my bookshelf to let me know to put in nonfiction.
It's got a Dewey Decimal. So
if it was good enough for Dewey.
I think technically fiction does as well, but we'll just Willie Jeffrey Rankin argues that horror works independently of fantasy sci-fi, which I kind of agree. And that's kind of why I don't have like a separate category on my website for like horror.
I also hate splitting up my authors because I tend to organize my author. So like Stephen King is going to be hard because Under the Dome versus It is going to, I just want to put you close together. Be like each other.
Let's see. The Gamers I probably would put that in sci-fi.
Yeah. You got a good point. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that's pretty Matrixy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I just looked over it. You're correct.
Okay. But otherwise, I think, yeah. And I would put Shadow the Stain and Free Lunch kind of in like a fairy tale-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say folk almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say folk for Shadow of the Stain. More so than fairy tale, because it wouldn't be a fairy tale in a Tolkienian sense,
right,
as he would define it. And so
Michael brought him up first. It wasn't me.
I will stick to his definitions of fairy tale at the very least. Always.
If we were together in the same room, we should have some sort of Lord of the Rings item that we pass around to whoever
the conch shell
brings up Lord of the Rings or Tolkien first.
This should be kind of like a Tolkien curse jar. Like, all right, whoever does it first puts in the dollar.
Well, you guys weren't mentioning C.S. Lewis enough, as it was confirmed to me on Twitter today.
Yeah, that was a good
I was telling you, there's a whole lot of Ransom trilogy referencing constantly.
I really need to read that. I can't believe that. I don't think my parents had it in the house. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have read it as a kid. But
I got it for Christmas in high school, probably like in 10th grade. I read it. So the first one is pretty easy to get through, even as like a high schooler, right? The second one is more challenging, but there's just some neat stuff in it. And then the third one, when I read it, it's a challenging book for someone that's younger, right? It's like I got through it, but there was so much that I didn't get, right? It just didn't click. And then I read it again a few years later, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much in this. What is this book?
Yeah, that was one too that I read straight through, and I always think back to some of our books that we read in like elementary school, the books that really got me into reading, and I go, wait, that's part of a series. There's more to the story. So like for the longest time, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, even as a Catholic back in my old days, that's the only one I knew about. I was like, oh, that was a good story. Little did I know that, oh, that's just one of many. And or Indian in the Cupboard or the Giver series. The third book in the Giver series is
I've only ever read the first of that.
Oh, it was so good, because I never really liked the ending for the Giver, but that was another one that
it's a little bit of a downer ending.
Well, so yeah, I'm kind of okay with that, especially in a
I was okay with
novel,
it too.
But
like it works within the novel.
Yeah, the fact that he finds like the sled on top of the hill and he like goes down into the village, and that just happens to be the thing that he sees in his vision. I was just like, oh well, that's stupid. So
it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's been a while. I don't remember the village reference. I remember the sled.
It's just very much at the end, but yeah, Indian in the Cupboard and A Wrinkle in Time, all these books. I was like, oh, that was nice. I wish someone would have told me, like, not even the books that we had, because we had a Clue Me In, so trivia after you read the book. So I've read Charlotte's Web way too many times,
the first two sequels to Wrinkle in Time are way better than Wrinkle.
Yeah,
Wind in the Door and Swiftly Tilting Planet are much better than Wrinkle in Time.
Yep, those are the ones I have to read.
Yep. Wind in the Door and Wrinkle in Time are excellent. I'm not Wrinkle. Wind in the Door and Swiftly Tilting Planet. That's it. Sorry.
I'm trying to think if there's any books like that I didn't realize had sequels.
I don't know that that's ever happened to me. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was just bad marketing back in the day. Now it's from the publishers of Harry Potter comes everything else.
I guess I spent a lot of time in the library pulling stuff directly off the shelf. And usually I read faster than my mom would bring me back. So I would grab a whole, if I just saw like 1, 2, 3, I'd just grab the whole thing. So I remember reading all like the Indian in the Cupboard series as a series, but I don't know if there's
Now, I
anything
can
else
say
like that.
that, my perception of an author's work was that sometimes did happen, that how you perceive the author was moderated by what was available in your county's library. Right?
Yeah.
Goodness, I'm trying to think of an example now. I can't think of one now. But you check out everything that the library had on a given author, 4 or 5, 6 books maybe. And
Yeah.
then you look later and that person wrote 25 books. What? Where were all these books all my life? Maybe not in a single series, but just
Timothy Zahn writes more than Star Wars books. Oh, really?
right.
That's all I saw of him. And they were good. Don't get me wrong.
But... Oh yeah. Oh no, he and Stackpole were the best at Star Wars.
Yeah. Probably for me, something similar to that would be Frank Peretti, because my library had like maybe 3 of the Cooper kids books, but like none of his other stuff was anywhere near. It was like all shelved like in the adult section.
I liked the Cooper kids. I think they're on the shelf over near me, very close to me somewhere. I liked all 8 of those. I know the blue ones are always considered better than the green ones that came later, but those were my favorite thing that Frank Peretti did.
I think I've only read 3 because that's all that
they
had.
So can you figure out, like, do you remember anything of what you read? Which ones?
There was a maze one.
Okay, so that was the Tombs of Anak.
Okay, yep. That
was a giant in the maze.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And then there was one.
There was like a Western blood, ghost. Patrick lasted. What was that?
There was like a Western ghost.
That was the Legend of Annie Murphy.
Yeah, they talked about like paper folding over and touching.
Yeah. I liked that one. That one's in the batch that people didn't like as much.
Really?
The green books.
And I can't think if I read it, but I know that I watched the movie version of
I didn't know there was any kind
the one with all the spiders.
We don't have to chase this rabbit. I was just curious. Because I like those, because that was interesting, because he hits across those 8 books. He's bouncing around to a lot of different pulp and science fiction genres, all within this set of stories geared at kind of preteens.
Okay, it wasn't a Cooper Kids, it was Hangman's Curse.
Okay.
All right.
I like those. I'm curious if they hold up. I'll have to reread them sometime.
Yeah, there's not much like them.
Yeah, because the base idea is like Christian Indiana Jones, but Indy has 2 teenage kids, a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
Right. So they've got both sexes to identify with. Right. They both have moments to shine and heroism, but no, they're good. They're good. I liked them. All right, we chased a rabbit.
All right. Where were we?
You're welcome.
This is one that I came up with. Based on free lunch, is there fairy food that you would be tempted to eat?
Not Turkish Delight. Every report I've heard is that it's really not that good by modern dessert standards.
So
does that count as that trope?
I think so.
Being tempted by Turkish Delight.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Wait, are you saying that C.S. Lewis may have had very one-to-one correlations of metaphors in his books, but you're telling me that other authors don't do that, and I can't just say Jesus? I've never heard of such a thing. So, the fun fact about Turkish Delight, because we ordered some because we had read Lion Witch Wardrobe, and my daughter was doing a presentation on it, so she thought it'd be fun to do one on Turkish Delight. Well, it's a little like sugary, I don't know, like gelatin. But the fact that it was taking place during the war,
World War II,
the second one, sugar was being rationed. So for Edmund to ask for that is like that was the most sweetest treat that he could think of. But they're out in the country away, so not to get bombed by the Luftwaffe, and so that was his like. Imagine something that you really really want. It's like, well, there's this sugary treat that I could have, and for him that was good. But that's why it was so rare, because it's like, well, nothing was going, or like there was a rationing of those sweets during the war. So learn with your kids, homeschool your kids, learn with your
correct.
Kids.
Yep.
I still wouldn't fall for Turkish Delight.
Right. Patrick, would you?
So I guess this is always, do you know the book that you're in? Do you know the genre of the story that you're in?
Right.
And I feel like
where are we encountering this fairy food?
Yeah.
Are we encountering it in the woods? Because it's like, if I come across a plate of sushi in the woods, I'm going to leave it there, right?
So here's the thing that I think about. If I was choking to death in the middle of like Disney World, I think I would die, because I don't want to be the person to get in somebody else's life and make them responsible for me. I just, as a Midwesterner, I just feel terrible. My face would turn red for a different reason if I had to inculcate myself into other people's lives and ask for help. So I probably wouldn't touch anything, even if I was starving to death, because, well, that's just not what we do here.
I actually learned how to do the Heimlich maneuver on myself, just in case.
Wait,
I was like, for that exact reason. Like, I can't. I'm not going to rely on somebody else to do this for me.
You Midwesterners need to learn how to give and accept a little Southern hospitality. Well, this is weird.
Listen, I might have to actually talk to that person and thank them. And then what do you do after that? Like, what's the conversation? Well, thanks for saving my life. All right, see you later. Thanks. Bye. Like,
I mean, isn't that better than being dead?
Hold on. No, it is not. So if I have to send a Christmas card when I already don't do Christmas cards, you know what? I'm gonna eat the Kung Pao chicken a little bit faster next time.
So what about in the context of free lunch, where you are coming into a place that you assume you were expected, but there's not like a clear explanation for the presence of food?
Yeah, that one's a little bit harder, because like they break into that house almost essentially like, no, this is the cabin. I'd be like, no, this is not our cabin. Our key would work. And we're just gonna be outside freezing. We're eating the crackers with the smart girl. But
that's a little harder and weirder. It's in the case of, it's like an Airbnb. You don't know these people, and it's just a little odd.
Yeah.
But it also, no one comes back for the food, and it's just sitting there, and then it feels wasteful. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to like clean it up, put it in Tupperware, and put it in the fridge for them.
Yeah. There's a scene in Clerks where Dante's got the be honest, take the money and leave the change, and his girlfriend says, like, well, don't you think they're going to steal? It's like, no, the fact that you're not watching, people think that they're being watched, so they're going to be honest because they think they're being watched. I just feel like this is a trap, and if I touch the food, someone's going to spring out of the closet and go, "Is that yours?" No, it's not, and then I'll have to leave and burn down the cabin. Like, well, that was fun. I'm going to drive 18 more hours to get away from here.
Joseph says, I wouldn't fall for Turkish delight, but if there were a hot plate of grits and fried eggs, I might be in trouble with the berries. And Dave K says barbecue brisket on the smoker. Meat is probably pretty tempting for me, and I have a really bad sweet tooth, so I probably would eat candy.
Now, see, that's interesting because like a smaller food like a candy or sweet or secondary thing is a little different than like the whole roast, right? That's less mind-boggling that you get into an Airbnb and they've sent a nice bowl of mints out for you, right? There's like a bowl of Andy's mints sitting on the
if
table.
They've got a little fancy glass bowl full of cinnamon red hots, like my grandmother.
You feel like it's okay to eat 5 or 6 Starburst out of that bowl, right?
Yeah, they're not going to count. And I'm going to eat the yellow ones because I'm going to trick them. They think they're going to get me with the pinks and the reds. No, yellows.
Well, I mean, the yellow and the oranges are the best ones anyway, so.
They're third and fourth best.
Yeah, you're one of those red and pink guys. That makes no sense.
I've never enjoyed cherry as a candy flavor.
And then you smush them together, and then you have the best of flavors.
Does anybody want my favorite piece of random trivia about candy flavors?
Of course.
Do you know why banana candy and cherry candy are particularly bad? And why they don't taste like what we think of as banana and cherry?
Now, I've heard that bananas are based on a different type of banana.
Yes. So those flavors were developed in the very early 1900s by food chemists based on the dominant cultivars at the time. And we do not really have either those banana or cherry cultivars, but yet they have remained the dominant expected flavoring of banana and cherry candy and cough syrup and everything. And it's awful. However, the grape is based on Concord grapes that we're still familiar with. So that's why grape is. Yep, that's why grape is. That's one of my favorite pieces of random trivia. So it's cute. I'm sorry.
Lemon will always be a better yellow flavor than banana.
Always.
And when Skittles changed their green to green apple.
Oh, pox.
That was like
pox on your house.
What were you thinking? I think they changed it back recently, but that doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, rabbit chased and beat. What's next? That one was my fault. Again.
Doug Wise says, "Isn't Jadis some Nephilim giantess queen? This is extremely poor know your genre decision making." Just as a bringing up Tolkien, since we were talking about Lewis, in The Hobbit, the dwarves leave the path in Mirkwood to interrupt an elven party and get food. If they had successfully eaten food there, would that have been a problem?
Not for dwarves.
One of them had already made the mistake of walking into the river.
Right.
So there's definitely the fairy, that's the slumber, the sleeping from the river, the water. That's a very fairy tale-ish element.
Yep, and leaving the path and
right, and the elves. Yeah, that is too. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that context.
Doug Wise says to pass the Tom Bombadil figurine to me.
You gotta do the little dance first.
I am Midwestern white.
That's why it would be great. So one of the kind of a generic question, which setting was your favorite?
Let me look at the list. Okay, if we're just going purely with setting, I'm gonna go with The Wanderer of Ur, because I liked the post-flood, pre-Abraham, kind of shifted into a Conan the Barbarian style world.
Sure.
I thought that was good. That was cool. That's a setting I would be happy to explore more of.
Mhm.
So I'll go with that as one of the most fun settings.
I like the Shadow of the Stain, creepy forest, secret places,
I'm
bunny
not.
kitties.
Yeah, I'm not a foresty person, so I'm never gonna go out into the middle of the woods and be trapped by Swamp Thing or
You'll be safe
llama.
at home.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a city dweller, but I'm safe from them too. I mean, so I'm not gonna say Archangel, but I like the alternate history, so I would like to know more about it. I'd like to know
That's
more,
good too.
but Hidden Empire, I want to know, okay, sorry. There's an episode in the X-Files where
Here we
after
go.
so long, you finally get to the cigarette smoking man's backstory. And I don't think people like it, but I loved it. I want to see all the points that made the most evil character in all of fiction be the guy in the room that we all love to hate. I love that. And again, we didn't like him even after we knew his backstory. That was perfect. That was bad guys being bad guys once again. So having that more knowledge of what else is being controlled, and I don't think we talked about it at the time, but I read American Gods, and even the TV show added to that, but also because they kept forgetting to pay themselves, and it took so long to make the next season that they ended up like losing people, and they just got at war with each other for writers and stuff like that. Like Gillian Anderson ended up leaving anyway. But what else is in like the they live? What else is being controlled that are demons? And is there more than just Ares that is being kept under wraps? And then who's going to be the catalyst for the main story outside of this out of this short little fiction story? So I like that one, even though it's just our world.
I wanted more from the gamer.
Oh, the setting.
So, yeah, so that's probably
That one almost is mostly a setting,
right.
and then the point of view change gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean gimmick.
Yeah, okay, I don't mean gimmick as a bad thing there,
Okay,
but it is a key. The point of view change is a key feature of the structure and narrative of the story, and it's also a structural oddity at the same time. Is why I use the word gimmick.
Okay.
I don't mean it as a bad thing in that sense, but you're right that people can often mean that as cheap. I didn't mean that.
Sorry, I was viewing you lower than
It's
what you
a. I'm trying to find a better word. I don't have one.
kitschy.
I need a thesaurus for gimmick. Is there a more positive word? Yeah, I got nothing. So let's go on.
Doug says I enjoyed that
Shtick.
story a ton. What a
Shtick.
payoff.
Shtick. There you go.
It has a shtick.
That's just
I know Katie liked the force change perspective in that story a lot.
She loved it so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you, okay, so you and David both prefer one point of view stories, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? So what do you think
Yeah,
about something
definitely.
like Lord of the Rings that's an omniscient perspective that kind of wanders around as it sees fit? What does that do for you?
I greatly prefer The Hobbit. So
You prefer The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings?
I do.
Huh.
For a multitude of reasons.
Huh.
But as far as POV, that's one reason.
By the way, I get the Tom Bombadil figurine.
Do a little dance.
I don't I don't mind it. There's so much else to enjoy about the story that it and it doesn't really like bother me at all. Possibly because I've been familiar with the story for so long.
And you couldn't possibly tell Lord of the Rings from a single point of view?
Not really.
You couldn't. I mean, especially because literally at the Two Towers, when they split, what are you going to do? Follow Frodo the whole way, and then after the ring is destroyed, Gandalf and Aragorn sit down and tell him the entire other side of the story to catch up. It just doesn't. It just doesn't function.
I mean, Tolkien did.
What's funny is Gimli and Legolas.
Book 3, book 4, book 5, book 6, right? Where we had that sort of.
Right, he's alternates.
But even within those, it's very fluid.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good.
I would say something that, to draw a contrast with the gamer, Sam's emergence as the new heroic figure in book 6, as opposed to Frodo, is much, much smoother than the swap in the gamer, which has to be done much, much faster, of course. But
I mean, it's just a scene break.
It breaks.
I mean, there's literally a space and like a little dealy thing. I don't remember what it is in this book. It seems pretty smooth. It's not head hopping. It's not head hopping. It's a pretty industry standard way to change point of views and scenes.
I will say that the fox, which is very, very cute,
I love it.
and
it's wonderful. It is so Tolkienian.
It is, yes, and it is very much reminiscent of the style of The Hobbit. That would drive me nuts in basically any other book. I'd be like, why? But it feels like it belongs, like stylistically. So I don't know. It has to be done well.
Well, in the case of Lord of the Rings, there is a narrator.
Right.
There is an omniscient narrator that is recounting the story, who sometimes steps outside of the story. It's like, with Narnia, C.S. Lewis is the narrator in his own voice, right? He's not even disguising that it's his voice, right? Lord of the Rings, it's a little bit disguised. Ostensibly it's Bilbo morphing into no. Sorry, Lord of the Rings would be purely Frodo's voice.
Yeah,
but it's Hobbit, which would be Bilbo eventually morphing into Frodo's more serious editorial style. But anyway, rabbit chase.
Yep. Let me talk about a book that maybe people haven't read that is like The Gamer, though. There's a book series, 6 books called Magic 2.0. The first one's called Off to Be the Wizard by Scott Meyer. And this one's a really fun one because it has that quality of what we find here in the story, kind of matrixy. So a computer nerd happens to stumble upon this like very interesting like almost text document where he changes a few code and he realizes, oh, this is the entire code of the entire world, and he's living essentially in a world where he can change, and so he can go back in time, he can go forward in time, and so he tries to figure out how to be a wizard. Well, he doesn't want to do it here, so he goes back in time. He finds a book that says where would be the best place to be a wizard, and he goes back there, and then he finds all these other nerds who are using this code to essentially create magic from it. And it's really funny, but it's also a really good like little magic-y back and forth with good guys and bad guys. So Off to Be the Wizard is a recommendation from me.
Cool.
I think I've actually heard of that one.
I have not, so that's interesting.
And the main character is a bumbling fool. But also like someone you kind of do really want to root for. You're like, oh, come on, don't. Like the first thing, like he comes back and he's like trying to impress people, but he doesn't know how because he doesn't know the magic yet. But he's like, all right, I'm gonna go forward in time and I'm gonna come back, and he's got like saran wrap, and he's like, look at me, I've got this magic clear film, and like none of the people in the tavern are that impressed. They're like, I don't even know what that is. So, like, oh, okay,
fish out of water story. It sounds like,
yeah, kind of, sometimes
a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
What's next?
What's next? I think we talked a little bit about like our favorite stories and which ones stuck with us. I think Archangel was kind of the big one. Was there any of the stories that had a particular like theme that made you think?
Just made me think.
Just made you think.
Somehow I've misplaced my phone at my desk, and I was been looking at the table of contents. I haven't moved, and yet it's not here.
Quick, call it. It's in your hand.
Oh, there it is. Hold up. I set it under my monitor.
I think for me, I don't know. I really liked A Matter of Honor, just because it had that juxtaposition of people divided, and then like a unifying faith as well. And it made me think of try to figure out like, because of the way the story was set up, like who has a true faith, and then kind of come to a different conclusion by the end.
Yeah.
Which I tried to explain at the time. It probably would, when it was fresher, it'd be better just to go back and
I'd say probably like a theme that I liked the most was probably two godly fishmongers, in that God's truth is universal. You know, it's you can have these two guys fighting and also thinking about Jonah, and you know that's also completely relevant to the alien they come across. The same things are true, you know, across God's universe. There's not, you know, if there are aliens, then there's one we could chase. But if there are aliens, they wouldn't be outside of God's paradigm, you know. And I just like the way that this particular story handled that.
Yeah.
There are aliens. Stories of them always seem to invoke Jesus, but never. He's in a pantheon of gods. And anytime alien abductees mention and cry out to Jesus, suddenly these alien entities screech out in pain and leave the abductees alone. It's weird. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what else we would call this. It's almost demonic.
I was meaning if there are, you know, aliens as presented. It's just one of those, okay. So it's one of those things. Since I write sci-fi and think about sci-fi, though there's no aliens in my science fiction, but you know, Katie mentioned earlier talking about how some people approach certain stories as if it were a post-religious, post-Christian, post all of that, right? And you know, so as we talk about multiverse stories or alien stories or things, I'm like, none of those things are any problem to God's existence. It's like your view of God is way too small. If you think, oh well, if we find aliens someday, now you'll know it's not true. No. Then God is the God of another race of intelligent creatures, or Yeah, it makes me think about it. Okay, here's the story to chase. Here's the rabbit. I'll try and keep it short. Right, the last 25 years of cosmology and physics, right? How as we're rounding out and finding some of these last subatomic particles, we found the Higgs boson, the one that gives mass, and all these things that were predicted all these years ago with math, and we're finding out that the universe is indeed actually, we live in a finely tuned universe, and that is a physics term, not a religious or philosophical or theological term. The finely tuned universe is basically that all the numbers are what they are, and if those numbers were anything else, then the universe would not be able to exist. Right? It's like the weight of the boson Higgs. If you changed it, then literally atoms couldn't form together. Right? It's like it's that finely tuned, and Christians are like, duh. Right? We're like, we've been telling you this all along. What's your problem? And it's funny, as atheist cosmologists and physicists will then turn around and say, well, it's a multiverse situation. We live in the one Goldilocks universe where we rolled all the numbers correct, and there's all these other universes probably out there. And for starters, that's funny to me because they've immediately tracked out of the realm of science, because they're positing things that aren't provable in any way, right? So you can't. They're positing things that aren't scienceable. And they're making these things, trying to retreat from God by saying, well, we'll just increase the number of probabilities infinitely. And I'm like, but you just increase the size of God's kingdom just as much. That doesn't bother us at all to say that, well, there must be a multiverse. It's like, okay, go ahead. My God can handle that.
Yeah.
So that's just, I just like that same kind of idea is it lands in here, that there's a wild blue yonder out there. There's an alien, and God's truth is still the same.
Yeah, the way that they respond to seeing their own planet
Mm-hmm.
is
that's a good moment too.
Just that awe and wonder and glorify God.
Mm.
And it's like that. It's like, yes. Me being taken out of my mundane life and shown something impossible only makes my God bigger, right? Like, yeah, that I agree. That's a really good one.
If you want to see us dismantle the multiverse, you can go to caveofthecross.com and check out the book How to Be an Atheist, where we talk about exactly what Michael Kane talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I even did a book review on let's see, I'm not going to butcher her name because it's German, and my German's almost as worse as my English, but it's Lost in the Math, where some scientist is talking about all these people, they want to find like the beautiful equation to explain everything, but why are we expecting beauty? But then she also turns around and uses a lot of biblical language and goes back on herself a lot to say, well, we need to find something that works, and works. It might be simple and might be, able to be viewed by us. And why are we thinking that? Yeah. Why are you thinking that? Exactly what's being talked about. Yeah, that name that I can't pronounce, Sabine. I'm just going to cough through it.
Hassenfelder.
Sure, there you go. See,
I took German in college. I can. That it just basically means that I can fake it.
That's just grunt a few times. Just grunt and kind of add a few glottal stops. It's hard.
If you throw basically any other name at me, as evidenced by this entire experience, I will not be confident. But if you want me to pronounce a German last name, I can do that. So we talked a little bit in the last discussion about the editor's note and the blurb, and I thought that it would be interesting because we didn't talk about this, to talk a little bit about how well we thought the anthology lived up to what Joseph said in his editor's note, and then like the blurb, particularly the inspiring wonder and awe through stories of high strangeness and other modern fairy tales for grown-ups. Do you guys think that it delivered on that sort of promise? And yeah.
Let me go look up the blurb.
So I would say yes, in just the simplest sense. I mean, I probably could think more highly of what's being talked about, and I will fail to rise to the expectations of that. But I just think about each character was a vessel for the story. They were attuned to what it was supposed to be, and I'm not even saying like everyone has to be, the uber Christian person in this, and it has to be a story about God, because there were some in there that wasn't explicitly about that. But each character, I didn't feel like was the author talking in the way of the story, but through the story, and they were operating as what was given to us. And of course, we can say, well, that has to happen because of the nature of short stories, but also, maybe that's the point of it. But like when I read Game of Thrones and I'm reading Cersei's 18th chapter, I'm just like, this person doesn't live in this world. This person is just lecturing for the sake of it. And it in the TV show where one of the characters talks about, well, why don't we have a representative democracy? And everyone laughs. Okay, that just takes me further out of the story. But of course, that story took me further out regardless. But none of the stories did a wink and a nod to the audience, where everything now has to be deconstruction and meta. And there is a place for that. I don't need all good characters. I can like morally gray characters. But obviously, when everything is gray, then how, what do you eat on that plate? But each of these stories were a person who lived in that universe, who was talking as that character, and it didn't deviate from, like the fishmongers, right? They were trying to understand what it was like, and there was no wink and the nod to the audience, except for looking at that through their perspective. And then you're like, oh, I know what they're doing. They're seeing the planet, or they're seeing the book of Jonah lived out here. So I think it just did it for that. And it's wondrous and awful, full of awe, that that stories can be written in that way. And I think we touched about it a few different times, is that's the nature of the short story, and there's not enough room for your fluff to be put in there. So
sure,
there we go. I'll kick us off.
I'll have a minor caveat with what you said, that there is one story that's vaguely meta and deconstructive, although it doesn't do any fourth wall stuff. I will say that Free Lunch does have an awareness, a meta awareness, but it doesn't wink at the audience, and that is like the purpose of that story too, on some level. So but it's not done in a bad way, because like I said, that's part of the function of that story, is the fact that the character is genre aware, as we were talking about. She was the only one that was genre aware, but that's kind of the point too. So
yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It was like the only one that kind of winks at the audience is free lunch, but it's
right,
not.
but
It's not a.
It's
ha
not doing.
ha, it's not like a narrator and the audience against the main character. Like, haha.
There's no cynicism in it. There's no
Right.
cynicism in its awareness. It's good natured.
Still very genuine. Yeah.
Yeah. It is earnest. Let me say it that way. It's still earnest, and I think that is important. I mean, the answer's got to be the overall answer to your question has got to be yes. I will say there was more high strangeness than awe and wonder.
Sure.
Wonder I view as more of an inherently positive, kind of the approach of the numinous, and really Godly Fishmonger is the only one that approached, that kind of numinous aspect, the wonder aspect to me. Maybe I missed one. I guess there's a little bit of that at the end of Archangel, and some scattered him, but it was a lot more strange, and that's okay. There's no issues. I'm not picking at anything. I would say yes. Sorry. Mute myself for a second.
And I would say, as far as the interplay of like the supernatural with kind of the fantastic stories, I would say that Joseph's editor's note was appropriate for the stories that were in there. Now, when I first read it and now having read all of the stories, kind of having a context for more specifics, I do feel that where he ultimately went with it. I'll read the part where he says, these stories are about the different perspective, the far older and far more useful perspective. We're not so much killing science as we're killing science fiction. Though you may use redeem if you like. I think we are seeing in these a much greater emphasis on the supernatural than necessarily the materialism, if that makes sense.
Sure.
If I'm distilling the editor's note appropriately there. Let's see.
Despite two of the stories being, quite science fiction, but
that's why I would use the term.
Hash that out some other day.
I also thought it would be interesting to ask you guys if you thought it is possible to talk about these kind of in the context of like Christian fiction or like Christian made fiction. I don't know if you guys saw my live stream about that where we talked about that article about Christian made fiction, and specifically it talked about sci-fi and fantasy.
I subscribe to Periapsis Press YouTube page. I click the bell and I like all the posts. So yes, I did. I did see that.
I mean, short answer is no, it's not Christian fiction, trademark,
Right.
It's not, it doesn't go on the shelf besides the Amish romance series, and that's
because they're flung off the shelf
fine.
and burnt. We only need about 6 of them, not 60,000 of them. Yes, put this one on the Christian fiction shelf. Pick it up, thumb it through. You're gonna see all the people's bodies on them, and then you're gonna come to this stark contrast. It's gonna pull you in, and you're like, "What is that?" And the old biddies that are at the church library are gonna pick the body person, but you'll find your audience who was like, hey, this one looks different, and pick this up. So this is like the never ending story. Pick out.
I think they are.
You'd have to put it beside Frank Peretti and Ted Decker.
Right.
You know, if you were going to put them there, you'd need to put them between those two guys, because that audience would be okay with this, right? But yeah, it's that's all those conversations about marketing groups and the way that different industries have really dialed into certain markets, and part of that is the women that read a whole bunch of Amish novels read a whole lot of novels, and so you focus on that and you can make money, right? I mean, I get it. It's you do what you got to stay in business. Some things are marketable to certain people.
Right.
I think there's stuff being left behind. Obviously, there's stuff being left on the floor. There's people that would read stuff that are getting left out. Absolutely. So, but I get how Christian fiction ended up in this point. I understand. Right.
Well, and that's why if we're talking about marketing, if I'm 13 years old again, I'm enjoying Barnes and Noble because it's still a thing, and I'm all the way in the back by the bathrooms. Anime is just starting to come onto the shelves. And so I'm going to put this in the sci-fi section because there's my audience, sci-fi nerds and geeks that will pick things up and go, oh, this is interesting. But then I'm going to spend all my marketing power to get the Christians to go to the back of the store and go find that book, because that's who I ultimately want to read it. But also I'm going to I think this is the redemption of sci-fi, redeem it from what into what is always going to be the question. And so you have your mix of authors, and you have to be comfortable with that, both as the reader and as the editor. But I'm going to want two audiences, and I'm going to tell one audience louder than the other one.
This is, I mean, look, it's the same problem that every Christian that is writing ultimately comes across: is where do we put our work? How do we what categories on Amazon do we click and drop it into? Right. Like there's a deep nestled down in there. There's like I think there's a Christian science fiction and fantasy genre label buried deep into Amazon, right? And it's like, do I put After Moses in that? I don't know, because I don't, like I said, these things are marketing groups. So it's like, does it go with the other stuff but that certainly doesn't go with a lot of stuff that's labeled as Christian fantasy, because there's a lot of that ends up being heavy-handed allegorical, right? Especially the trad Christian publishers, right? What there is ends up being a little heavy-handed allegorical. So it definitely doesn't fit there, but I don't know. Like, I don't have good straight answers, because it's like somebody's going to be mad at my book someday because they're like, this has Christian characters in it. I wasn't warned of this development. This. Yeah, no, they're gonna be mad when they find out that Matthew's a decent guy because he's Catholic. But it's like, what do you do? Do you?
Yeah.
Right.
Like
I don't.
Paula Ritchie's Penance is on par with this book. Like, it has clear Christian themes in it, but also you don't have the payoff of the conversion scene, but it does happen. But it's more about the story of a girl with superpowers fighting aliens and finds the rogue alien that leaves the flock. It's a good book. I highly recommend it. But that one is like, well, is it Christian? I mean, it's not like overly Jesusified in there, so it's not Christian enough for your church social, but it's way too Christian for just normal sci-fi, because it has anything good to say about God. Like even in the popular sci-fi. You know, oh, we'll stick Mormons in there so we can steal their ship because those stupid Mormons. Okay, like I get that, but also they survived and built a spaceship. That's pretty stinking cool.
Yeah, or as another example of where do you put things. So I read just recently. I always forget S. Kirk Pierce Chawla. She wrote two of the stories in this one. You know, I read one of her novels, and it's the beginning of a series, and the main character is not Christian, but his girlfriend is, but it's cyberpunk, and she's part of an unregistered sect that's closely watched by the government. She's Eastern Orthodox, you know, unregistered sect. You know, and so, but it's not Christian in that sense, although I suspect it will get more so later on. But it is also in the cyberpunk and techno thriller genres, so there are quite a few F-bombs and some hard content you would expect with cyberpunk. Right now, she doesn't ever revel in it. It's not. She doesn't revel in it in a way that tempts to sin. You know, that's kind of the standard, I think, for a Christian writer, is write about evil but never tempt to sin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she never does that, but the language would turn a lot of people's heads. But at the same time, that's a natural part of the world that she's writing, and she does it in a way that makes sense for the story. Where do you put that? You know,
Right.
Especially because I suspect that the Christian elements will increase later. And I just read the first novel of, I think she just published the fifth, I think just a week or two ago. I think that will increase. But again, where do you put it? You know, there's not a good place. There's not a good straight clean answer to this at the moment. Especially for those of us that are not wanting to explicitly sell our work only to Christians. And that's really the problem with it's not okay. It's not necessarily a problem. But that is clearly the goal of things labeled Christian fiction and marketed as Christian fiction, is the 99% of the target demographic are Christians,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's who it's marketed to. That's who it's for. That trademark conversion scene, right? It's really not so much going. It's not usually really built in a way to be a an outward gospel presentation, if that makes sense, an outward presenting of the gospel. So much more of this is something the in crowd and audience expects and understands, and we look for this and we applaud this because this is a good thing, because we want people to repent of their sins and
Mm-hmm.
and turn to Christ, you know. But if that's not your primary demographic, you know, or if it's not just that or if it's just not your only demographic, that's really the thing. And I would say that Joseph Knowles did not put this collection together only for Christians, right? And by the same token, with my book, I'm not writing it only for Christians. You know, those are the things that are harder to market, harder to figure out what labels to slap on, and harder to talk about as Christians, because there is a difference. We are separate from the world. We do have different ideas from the world. We think our ideas are the ones that the world is based upon, so that they should be paying attention because we're the ones telling the truth about things. And so we can do it better than them in a lot of ways. We know how to tell stories. But it leaves a lot of things in the middle. And I would suspect that this anthology kind of falls in that weird kind of middle ground of a difficult area. Rant over. I don't know what else to say.
The controversial take is it's okay to be Christian.
So Michael mentioned Pierce Chawla's book that he read.
Mm-hmm.
I've read two of Fred's. I read The Devil's Dictum and Ronald Reagan's Brilliant Bullet. And he also wrote a short story for the second Perhaps Christmas anthology. So
was it alt history too?
No, but it was definitely has some of his flair.
Okay.
Basically realistic angels crash the Christmas service. So
biblically accurate
biblically
angels,
accurate
like from
angels.
the meme. Okay.
Yep.
Oh man.
Devil's Dictum is one that I enjoy recommending. That one is alt history, but it's United States founded by pirates instead of pilgrims.
That's on my list. I plan on reading that.
Yeah, as soon as I'm done with my biography of J. Gresham Machen, that's my next one. So I've already got it slotted.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Ronald Reagan's Brilliant Bullet is also alt history, Cold War era, and
it's a great title. I don't know what it's about, but it's a great title for a book.
Well, Ronald Reagan has a rocket-powered flying suit, so
I like it already.
And it starts there, right? Like,
there's my elevator pitch.
What's funny about that is that statement, if you swap out a bunch of different presidents, has a lot different impact. And for whatever reason, Ronald Reagan makes it one of the funniest, probably. Yeah. I don't know why, but
it makes it a villain story if it's Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
So I definitely recommend those.
Okay, Teddy Roosevelt would be pretty funny too. He would be pretty funny too.
That one would be expected though, wouldn't it?
Right. That's why it's funny, is because he's the guy. He's one that got shot during a speech and finished the speech. So you'd expect that.
Some of our presidents, like, just we learned the most boring parts in school, and like,
yeah,
some of them were really just cool people.
I mean, did you not watch the news this last week and see all the pictures of a former president leaning out of a McDonald's drive-through window? I mean, we kind of live in those times still, Katie.
That's true.
Oh,
Patrick, you are familiar with some of Joseph's other work. I haven't.
Yeah. He's got a Substack that I found when I think he was publishing stories for it's a story called Beneath the Hill, and he was kind of doing every couple weeks like a small chapter, and it's a short story. So it like, if you like these stories, go to his Substack, which is linked on his Twitter page, and it's just like 4 parts, and it has the same feel. Takes place in a post-apocalyptic Appalachian mountains, and deals with a lot of the same themes. Now a bit more overtly, and it is 4 parts, but it's still probably, like, if you set this as his, like, editor insert at the end, like, oh, here's the 9th hidden story, this would slot in well. And so it has a lot of those same themes, and is I'm going to use this term incorrectly, a simple story, but in the good way of, it's telling you the story, and it has the themes that you want to see. And I mean, he gets me with post-apocalyptic future and Appalachia. Like, I'm there, and it's just I love post-apocalyptic fiction, but a lot of times, if you told me, who the good guys, or if you didn't tell me who the good guys were, I probably would have a hard time focusing on exactly who's to root for. But I like that setting where it's the lone wanderer who's just doing the good thing or trying to do the good thing. Vash the Stampede from Trigon, like it just trying to do the right thing when it shouldn't happen. Post-apocalyptic morals are out the window, right? And fittest survive at that point, and the biggest people with the biggest guns that they win in the end, except for that one person who wants to do the good thing. So that's kind of that story. So it's all free that you can check out on a Substack. So
cool.
I would highly recommend.
9th hidden or 11th hidden story.
There you go.
Very cool.
But I mean, I tried to find a lot of these folks just on, clicking on the hyperlink on Amazon, and it was pretty surprising that they didn't have anything on there. And so either that's they just don't publish on Amazon, which is perfectly fine. That's the choice that you make. But also, it's also pretty impressive if this is kind of a hobby for them, or maybe it's just a new avenue for them, and they haven't gotten that book out yet that they wanted to. So this was just nice. Again, like even the ones that I didn't like, I still liked, and I enjoyed the stories for what they were, and they didn't talk down to me, and they didn't hate me, and they didn't hate themselves. So it was nice to have that.
Yeah. I was thinking that I would also like to hear if you guys were reminded by any of these short stories of other indies that we could recommend to people. The Have Ye Offered Unto Me reminded me of The Thing from HR by Roy Griffiths. That one is like a it's more Lovecraftian, but it has it takes place on a college campus. Takes place on a college campus. Has kind of some of those occult horror elements that we were talking about. A little more Lovecraftian, but cultists out to destroy the world. And then it has a nice resolution, kind of in a similar way to Have Ye Offered Him to Me. So I wanted to bring that one up.
I mean, the Ecliptic series is up there.
Yeah.
So I mean, Uriel's Revenge has a lot of similar punch points for Archangel, and is a good read, and I really like the review that's done on your website, parispress.com. And so if you're thinking about, well, what could I have a little bit more demons in my sci-fi? There's a book out there for you.
Patrick Guest wrote that. I really
okay.
That's why
you're saying you didn't review a book by your own husband?
No, I did.
That's probably for the best.
Well, I did a fair bit of editing, and so yeah, Patrick very, very kindly wrote a nice guest review for me.
And she corrected my spelling in a few words that didn't go there, so that's always appreciated. And then I mean, I can't not mention the Drosselmeyer series from Paul Thompson. Has that fantasy element that we see a lot in here, and is just a a stellar story. And even the audiobook, because Paul does music and he adds a little bit of score, especially in the fight scenes. Some of those are just so good to listen to too. So like I read the book because I've got the signed copies, and I ordered them from his website directly, and then I listened to it after I read that one with friends or along with friends. And then can I also mention Hacking Galileo, which is such a fun, if you're my age, so like 40, mid 40s, and you just want to relive childhood of like LAN parties, thinking you're better than other people, being snot-nosed people, being smarter than what you are, and especially the story. Fentonwood's Hacking Galileo is like, what if War Games, the movie War Games, was just a better story and a better book, and you could see yourself in that character.
So it's not an exact match because really this is more of an adventure, but it brought in, some of the supernatural element too. But Morona Grant and the Lost Tomb of Golgotha.
I've been meaning to read that.
By Brenna Williamson. It's good. It's really it's a pulpy Indiana Jones. It's if you give the elevator pitch of woman Indiana Jones, that gets the point across. But it's funny. It avoids the girl boss stuff in a very kind of funny, clever way, and that there's this the benefactor for this expedition is putting together the team, right? Only the benefactors like this. I think it's set in the 30s. As kind of is appropriate. Is that she's basically this early girl power, this elderly British woman, and she's putting it's an all woman team she's trying to put together, and she puts together a pretty bad team, right? Because this isn't going to go well. She's going to fly the plane herself, and the lead's like no, and so the lead gets her own pilot, and it's like this huge Russian bear of a man. So it's all these women and this huge Russian guy that's in the broken English. So it's a funny setup, right? And so, but the lead is really just does not want to put up with the woman that's all for the women stuff, right? She's like, oh, just let me do my job, please. But it's fun. The basic premise was the treasure we're hunting for is the 30 pieces of silver that was paid to Judas. Or it's cursed. His descendants, he had descendants apparently, kept it, and there's this cult of Judas, and we're looking for his tomb and all that. So it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You get it's this Indiana Jones style adventure, which means that there's the supernatural stuff that kind of has this vague, mystified biblical tie, which is pretty standard for the pulp genre. But it was fun. I liked it. I had a good time with it. So. Not more of an adventure, not a wonder story, but I had a good time and kind of a similar setting to some of these in some ways. So,
and what was the name of it again?
Morona Grant and the Lost Tomb of Golgotha. Gotcha. She's mostly and another good thing is she's an illustrator too, and so every chapter has an illustration that she's done, and they're good. I mean, that's I think a really big selling point that. The author did the illustrations too.
Yeah, I follow her on Twitter, and
she's getting close to done with the second one.
Yeah,
she's getting close to done with the second one. But yeah, worth a read. I enjoyed it.
And I should probably mention William Jeffrey Rankin. His because his horror stuff, I would say, has some of the same kind of horror elements that we were talking about earlier. Kind of those supernaturally where does this fit? Is this fantasy?
Yeah, his I think was it the second one, his walk out in the woods with grandfather in Perry Christmas. That one has like that going out into the woods, and you're meeting Tolkien or Lewis's world type feel. It's just like reading that story smelled like Christmas to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His Invocations of the Submortal has some but that's
I have no idea what it's about. That's
a little
about,
bit
but I've seen
weirder
that
sort of
title,
occult
and
fiction stuff.
I have no idea what that's about, but I've seen that title, and that's a brilliant title.
It's cool.
Submortal. Oh, I don't know what that means, but I like it.
And it's also it's not alt history, but it takes place in the late 19th century, I think. So that's kind of fun. We've had in the Silence and Starsong collection, there were a couple of stories that were in very distinct settings like that. So that's why I wanted to bring that one up.
But see,
Horror
here's
is
what I'm
weird.
looking for.
I don't think I could write horror. I don't even understand how you write horror. My brain does not function that way.
And then the person died. Really, really bad. Yeah.
Then something happened and it was vaguely creepy.
Yeah. Like, have you ever read anything scary? Like, I get movie scares, so I get ambiance, I get the jump scare. That's the easy one. But I've never like read a book, and maybe close. Like, I usually don't like his writing, but for his fiction of this kind. But like Frank Peretti's Monster is a good book, but it's so bloody boring in between everything. But the monster scenes are the closest I've got to being like, oh, I'm kind of creeped out by this. But I've never been like, how do you turn the page and go,
Oh, yeah.
oh my.
I was gonna say the only two things I think that ever really was it was a Frank Peretti, but it was The Oath. Did you ever read The Oath?
Oh. Nope, I never read that one.
Okay, I remember when my mom was reading The Oath.
Yeah, there's definitely something in the woods, and people are like getting this mark, and it's rotting them out from the inside, and then the dragon is coming and eating them, and it was a little creepy. It was a little creepy, so that creeped me out a bit. And as a kid, one of the Cooper kids, it's funny we brought that up. The door in the dragon's throat creeped me out as a kid. There's some creepiness in that one. As a kid,
I can't I don't do audiobooks so well. I know a lot of people really, really like them as a way to read, when you're busy doing other stuff. But for me, it moves things too fast. So if I'm creeped out by something, like I can't control the speed
he won't
of the
slow
narrative.
down. They just don't keep going and opening the door. It's like Katie's like, stop. Don't open that door.
I'm like, okay, if I was looking at the page, I would jump 3 paragraphs down and skip over this awkward, like, you're doing it wrong, don't do that. But I remember in high school, my mom gave me, or somebody gave me, I think it was my mom, but that doesn't match up because my mom didn't give us books for a very long time. Like until we were adults and finally got through to her. No, we want to keep the book. Right? She was like, "We just go to the library and get it."
Parents, they just don't understand.
But I got a omnibus of Ted Decker's Circle trilogy before he added Green. And that was hard for me to get through in high school. I remember being scared. But not recently. I haven't.
Okay. So I'm looking not for a short story. I kind of want, like, I wanted something to sink my teeth into. I want it to be sci-fi. I want there to be like good characters, good moral characters, maybe that inspire, maybe that collect a team around them and they can go on adventures. And like reading one book is like reading 18 books. I don't know. There's just nothing out there for my taste. So I'm just forlorn as a reader out in the world. There's just nothing that anyone could say about that. Heavy sigh.
Are you trying to give us an on-ramp to talking about After Moses.
I would never do such a thing. I demand an apology right now that I would shill for other people's stuff, especially stuff that have read, liked, reviewed, and have done this a similar amount of time in the past as well.
Well, I would like to hear Michael talk about After Moses a bit, since we have spent all of these book discussions mentioning it occasionally. I'd like Michael to have a chance to talk about it.
What do you want me to talk about?
Well, like, do you want to talk about it sort of in the context of some of the stuff that we talked about tonight, like the sort of the purpose of sci-fi, or as you would interact with it, as opposed to Joseph, or alongside Joseph?
So, yeah, right. It's like you get into these genre conversations. What is this genre? What is that genre? And ultimately, it's like, I think I said recently on Twitter, that ultimately a genre is just a recognizable category of something, especially recognizable category of stories. And I think most people can, in most cases, properly sort between the science fiction or the fantasy genre, right? Most people can sort them in those boxes. And so it's like, but what is it that actually separates them truly? You know, because there are those places where it's like, for the most part, these stories went to fantasy. And one thing that, you know, fantasy is very often about man and his conflict and relationship with supernature, right? Whereas, and this people always look at me funny, whereas science fiction is about man and his conflict with nature. And by nature, I mean physics and technology and everything that is part of this world in reality. So there is like kind of there is a materialist difference there, and Joseph would kind of argue that clearly, and I don't think there's any necessarily, again, anything wrong with that, because we're creatures of material, right? We were placed into these bodies. We have this purpose, and unfortunately, most of our experiences are rather materialist. Most of our lives are very material in it, and so there's a good place to tell stories about that too. It's funny, when I started After Moses, I started it before the current AI craze, right? The backstory of After Moses is basically that, well, a super AI took over everything, but spoiler alert, the super AI Moses was benevolent. And so our AI overlord was actually benevolent. But I think most people would realize that even that would be bad for us. And so a century into Moses's time, Moses just disappears abruptly. And after a century of us having given over all of the stems, all of the engineering, the sciences, and even lots of the culture stuff, we've forgotten how to do these things. And so the setting is this one in decline, because people have stopped caring about some of these materialistic things, I guess. But, you know, when we were talking the other week about, you know, that I think there has to be this synthesis between the materialists and the mystical in a Christian worldview, right? Because we do have a spirit, but we live in a body. You know, one of the kind of themes that goes through After Moses is it's all set out in the solar system. Earth crumbled in the immediate aftermath of Moses leaving, and so it's all these colonies kind of just stringing along and slowly failing and trying to make things work. Is kind of the setting it's in, which is how I bring in the Western aspect, why things are kind of dusty, broken down towns. That's how I get the Western feel in there. But one of the big things is on Ganymede, which is one of Jupiter's moons. There are two big institutions that are kind of bastions of culture and reason and faith that's in the solar system. One of them is the University of Ganymede, which is like the one real educational facility that's still trying to do things right and still trying to recapture what we lost. And the other one across an icy plain is the Colonial Vatican, where the Catholics just set up a new Vatican after losing Earth. They had a reformation of some sort. I don't get into the details, but the assumption is whatever you think of Catholics, these are even better ones, is kind of the way I set it up, so that everybody should hopefully everybody should be happy, because I'm not trying to get into sectarian arguments in this story. But I set up that across the plains from each other there is the Vatican and the University of Ganymede. And especially as the series go on, you discover there's been a lot of collusion between those two institutions trying to keep things going. So that's that synthesis I'm talking about. It's fair to have both of those things. We need faith, we need reason, both of them together. So does that lean into anything we've talked about at all? That's my attempt to do so. It's not a story about the mystical. It's not a wonder story. It's mostly a string of adventures. Now, the first one, as Patrick alluded to, is kind of like a series of short stories. I kind of envisioned it as a quasi-serial, like you would read in a magazine, where each chapter is kind of standalone, but not really. And then as you get towards the end, you go, this isn't a serial. It's ending more like a novel, and everything is tied together and gone to a specific place. So it's kind of a weird format.
It took me a while to get through it, because I'm like, there's so much story in here. I feel like I've gotten my money's worth. And now, granted, I got a review copy, so there's that. But like, I'm reading it, I was like, how has he not ended this book yet? He needs to split this up and fleece more money out of me, because I've already read really good stories. This is where it should end, and you should be like, okay, here's the pickup. But no, there is an arc. But what I liked about it is that everyone is focused on the arc of the story, of the big arc. Everyone wants to get to the end of the king, or the end of the bad guy, and the stories all do lead up to that. But I can be happy in this story that I'm reading, and that mini arc in there is fulfills that. And so the Western aspect with the not pulp, but it feels like end of chapter 1 is a legitimate end of chapter 1 with the next story. What will our heroes do next? Find out next time. I really like that.
Yeah, and so that's another thing too, is that the chapters are definitely longer than average chapters. They're more like Tolkien length chapters, right? Not Council of Elrond length chapters, but average Tolkien chapters. And that most of them are 6,000 to 8,000 words, which is, most people these days do like 2,500 or 3,000 word chapters. But most people do more cliffhangers that string you along, whereas every chapter is a stopping point. You can finish a chapter and say, I finished this, I can put it down for the night. Yeah, which maybe works against me in that it's not always, pushing ahead to the next thing, because it is all these little mini arcs. But I'll tell you, I think it did writing out, because the later books are less quasi serial. There's still a little bit of that nature, but it's not as much. I still try and work in some job of the weeks, if that makes sense, where they're appropriate and fit in, but there's more novel like in structure. But what After Moses really did teach me to think about substructures within novels. People usually think about novels, they think of the whole novel, and then Are we going to go with a 3-act structure, or do we have a 5-act theory, or whatever that 7-act Japanese one? All these different ways of categorizing and breaking down, and that's fine. And I can break down the first book into acts as well, right? But there's substructures in between, in each of those things, and so it really almost changed my writing in a way to think of chapters and think of the structure within a chapter, and then think of how the structures of scenes work within chapters and stuff like that. So it's I don't know where I'm going with this really, but but you can read it them chapter by chapter, and I will very rarely leave you hanging. And when I do, you can kind of just imagine a black screen with "to be continued," because it's still an ending point, But I think it's good. I like it.
And you tell me how they get their money, how they get their food. If Matthew hasn't worked in a while, he's eating the nasty dried food.
He's eating ration bars out of the cabinet downstairs.
And if he hasn't been to port yet, he hasn't been able to replenish his stock. And so, I mean, those are the small things that I really like, because it's like, okay, if you give me Gatling guns, I'm there for Space Above and Beyond, or whatever else uses that. But where are they replenishing their stock? I just need a scene. And so we're heading to space dock. I get it. But if you throw lasers in there, well, lasers are just lasers. I don't know how you reload lasers, but it works for Star Wars. But I don't need them to go to dock to do that. But when you have all the Western-y parts, I need you to go to dock and figure it out for me.
I always compare it to Firefly.
Yeah, it's the biggest comparison. It makes sense,
right? I promoted it in a Firefly thread a while ago, and somebody commented, and it's like, I was really, really interested in this until the reviewer said, and it was some disparaging comment that I made about what's her name from Firefly.
It's got to be the prostitute.
Oh,
yeah. I can't remember her name. I would not say anything disparaging about Kaylee. She's cute.
She was the best character.
I think I call it's like Irina or
something like that.
I think I called her like an OnlyFans Karen, which isn't like a perfect thing, but like, and that was what this person latched onto, is like, I said that about Firefly. They're not going to read Michael's book.
That's hilarious.
So now you have to purchase the book that she was going to.
Oh man, that is good.
So I want to talk a little bit about my experience to even bolster my to overinflate Michael's head a little bit more. And like I think I bothered him quite a bit on Twitter, saying like, oh, I moved to the next chapter and this was really good and this is what I like about it. And he just must have been like, yeah, okay, dude, like leave me alone. But I'm on chapter 6, and again, like I feel like I've gotten if I would have bought this book, I would have gotten my money's worth. But there's an inclusion of a new character, and I won't spoil anything, but inclusion of a new character, and you think like, okay, she's just joined, and you're gonna have to wait like this book or the next book to like resolve an issue. And you have a line: she turned away from the alcove, and not everyone was captive to their past. And that scene was so perfect in the writing of just encapsulating Matthew's character and her character. And then I went to Amazon and I ordered all the other hardcovers that were out at the time. I was like, I'm invested. Like I don't know what's going to happen through the rest of this part of the book, but this part of the book can be by those books. And so I was there. And then I get later a good like kind of father-son scene where it's like, this universe needs men and you will be the man that this universe needs. I was like, did I make sure I ordered all the books in hardcover? Let me go back to my Amazon page. So again, page page 84 made me buy all the hardcovers, and not just because I felt bad getting this one, but I got too much for, if I would have bought this, it would have been too much money, or not enough money I would have given to Michael for the book. And so I had to buy all the other ones.
So one thing that's in it, one thing that I've
there we go.
I don't know that this was necessarily the plan how I envisioned it. Like I wasn't like consciously thinking it, but the main character he's not a completely static character, but he's largely static in that he's in his 30s. This isn't an 18-year-old setting out on an adventure. He's in his 30s. His moral compass is set. He's at a little bit of a slump in his life. You know, he's not a guy, he's not looking out to play hero, but he's always going to do the right thing, right? You know, he knows who he is, right? And so he's not a very dynamic character, but what the story largely ends up being about is how other people in the world change because of him. And, you know, one of the crew members that he picks up on accident is this rather angry 17-year-old man. And, you know, that's that relationship that Patrick is talking about there, that it's, you know, it's the favorite relation. It's the best relationship in the series as it goes on. Right. As Matthew basically is this father figure to this, you know, teen that had grown up on the street and
the Space Street.
Right. And, well, no, Underground Street. He grew up on Cirrus, but it's funny because Davy is the young guy. He starts really as the not very likable character.
Yeah, you don't like him,
right? You don't like him, and that's really the intention. And you know, by the time the later books kind of focus more on one of the given side characters, and the fourth book is Davy's book, and I had to do something that some people would consider an unforgivable sin, is that I sidelined the main hero and protagonist, basically put him out of the picture for almost the entire book. He's elsewhere. And the narrative has to weigh on Davy's shoulders. And it's like, well, why do you do that? Because I know a lot of people don't like it when the main character is sidelined, right? That's kind of a no-no for some people. But Matthew and Davy had this father-son relationship for 3 books. You know, in these 3 books, there's all this. This is how you be a man, right? You use the strength that you have to serve others. And so, well, I had to show what happened when Matthew wasn't there. It's like, okay, now who is Davy going to be? And I think it works. It's funny because it's probably Davy's book is probably my least favorite for silly reasons. It's basically, I know where I cut some corners, and I'll always know where I cut those corners, and I'm disappointed with myself. But I find that basically most of the guys that read the series, they're like, oh, I love Davy's book. You know, because that's where he gets to finally do his thing out of the shadow of his mentor. Like, who's he going to be? And I give him some cool stuff to do. So
I also do like that Matthew's just like, listen, if you want to go on your own, I will leave you. And that's fine. Like there's the, oh man, I either have to change or I have to fend for myself. Well, I don't want to do that. And so you do feel like Matthew will leave this guy just behind. All right, here's 3 days of rations. Good luck. Handshake.
So there we go. Yes, buy my book. If you're still watching this video or if you watch the replay, buy my books.
And to bring it back to Silence and Starsong, buy their books too.
Yep. I like the first one. It's good. Let me say it this way. It was better than I expected. And that's not to say I had like low expectations or anything. It's just you go into something and you're just like, you know, I wasn't necessarily like excited for it or anything. I wasn't not excited, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what I mean by that, but
I know what you mean by it.
Yeah. But it beat expectations.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because I've read too much Christian fiction.
Well, anthologies too are.
Yeah.
they can be really hit or miss, but I feel like
I'm not really an anthology fan. I'm not really an anthology fan because not everyone knows how to write short stories. I'm just going to say that. But these were all good short stories. These were all short stories that knew how to be short stories and what the medium was for.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, good.
It's also weird to read alive people. I haven't been doing that for a while. So
yeah.
So it's a weird thing to go, okay, they're not smoking. Why aren't they smoking? Oh, because this wasn't like post-apocalyptic 1982 written in 1932. Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Have you offered them to me? They smoke.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All the time.
Chain smoked.
Entire story.
I think they also smoke in Archangel, but I think that's for other reasons too.
All right. I think that we hit everything that I have.
Thank you, Katie, for hosting us for a book club. Again, like this is a good book that I hope other people would find other friends and do so. So thanks for the invite and for doing this up.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'd like to do it again in the future. I don't know if we'll do another of the Silence and Starsong magazines. I know some of the Silence and Starsong people were asking if we would. I'm in volume 2. Like, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Perhaps Express needs a Patreon-like service where we can throw money at you.
I like the idea of money, but I can't figure out how to monetize my efforts without compromising my review.
I've got give the money to me, and then I will give the money to you in the way that I think is fair, and then you won't have that qualm. So
it's tough because I want to. What I want to do with Periapsis Press is make a place that's reliable for readers to be able to go and just browse it and be like, everything on here is a recommendation and I can trust that. But as soon as you start talking money, it's like, okay, even if it's just like Amazon kickbacks, right? It's like, okay, did she review this because it's already a popular book, right? Like that kind of stuff. So, but
well, we know that's not the case right now because she reviewed my book.
Well, and if you want to send me books, I don't put the disclaimer of this was sent to me in lieu of a review because I don't care. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to review it. And, if you don't send me another free book, that's I already got it. So sucks to be you. But also, I might like it. And then you got a review on Amazon, Goodreads, Library Things. And then I usually do end of the year, which I always try and say, I'm not going to do an end of the year. I'm going to split it up. And I never do. And guess what? This year is not going to be any different.
The year's almost over, Patrick.
Video. Yeah. And now it just doesn't make sense. It'd be like, oh, here's one part. And then just wait 2 more months. And then you got my other 3 books that I've read.
Right. Yeah, I've got to figure out how to do a nice video review. That's something that's missing here, but we'll see.
I just read my review and then
you just read it straight up.
Yeah. Some people only interact with BookTube, and I don't really want to be part of BookTube. I got my own version of it that I'm comfortable with. And so just for people to click on. And then the really popular books always get really good. Like, oh, this was interesting. This was a good one. I picked it up because of it. I was like, I mean, out of all the ones that you did, it's the most popular one that you found. All right. But also, like, mine are pretty short, and I don't do spoilers or anything like that. You do the spoilers, but also I know, Miss Katie Room, And so if she puts it on her website, I know it's going to be of quality. Even if I don't like it, I know what it has enough because it fits in the categories of her philosophy. And so I trust her philosophy. And so, yeah, I'll spend the under $15 most of the time to pick up a book because Katie has inculcated herself as a connoisseur of good indie pub in the sci-fi and fantasy way.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate this. Very nice compliment.
I'm not being paid for this, but if you want to pay me, I will gladly take money.
All right, let's wrap this up. Turning into a bit of a there's a term that I
shill.
Shill.
See, that's why I do it for you guys, because you don't have to.
The way I look at it, if someone shills for Katie, Katie has a review of my book. Secondhand winning there.
All right. Thank you to everybody who tuned in to our live after party here and contributed in the chat. I appreciate you guys. And we encourage you to buy Silence and Starsong. Not just this one, but all of the issues. And to check out anything else that the authors have done. We've mentioned a couple of things that we're familiar with that they've done. And then, of course, I encourage you to check out Michael Kane's After Moses, as well as Patrick's Cave to the Cross show. I really enjoy that as well. Although it's more theological and less sci-fi, although he does have just as many caveats, sci-fi trivia dropped in his theology videos.
This reminds me of a Star Trek episode. Let me tell you about it.
Yep. Yeah, it's late.
Yep.
You guys have a great night.
Thank you.